Hi, Year 12. It's Mr. Azzopardi with a video about essays on religious experience. So this is going to look at how you might structure two possible essays on religious experience. First, it'll look at essays on conversion experiences. So that would be questions like, do conversion experiences offer good evidence for the existence of God? Something like that. You haven't got an essay directly just on conversion experiences in the five that I've asked you to choose from for homework, but it is the sort of essay that could come up in an exam. So I advise you to watch this piece of the video and make notes on it. Also, the second part of the video is going to look at comparing conversion and corporate experiences. So when you have a comparative essay like that, what's going to ask you is which one of them is better evidence for the existence of God, or which kind of experiences are more believable, or something like that. And so you're looking to see, is one kind of experience more believable than another? Or are they both not believable? Or are they both believable? Or however you want to say it. So we'll go through my structure. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. Just to the idea of these videos is, your essays should be your work, obviously, but just in case you're having trouble structuring the essay, just to give you a few ideas. You don't have to use my structure, but it gives you some ideas, some ways of thinking it through. So let's start with an essay on conversion experiences. Like I say, an essay on conversion experiences will be something like, are conversion experiences good evidence for the existence of God? I'm going to break it down into 4 perils now. You wouldn't be writing 4 perils in an exam, in an essay. I would advise you to write 3. But so the last 2, the ones that I've labelled 3 and 4 here, I would probably, if I was writing this essay, choose one of those 2 to write. You don't have to write both of them. Okay, peril 1. I've divided the arguments in favour of conversion experiences in favour of intellectual conversion and in favour of moral conversion. That doesn't mean I'm saying that all conversions are either intellectual or moral. It's just that you could say there's different ways of saying why they're convincing. You could say why an intellectual conversion is convincing, or you could say conversion experiences are convincing because they're moral conversions. And I kind of thought about this when after I did the essay last time, after I did the video last time, and I think that increasingly this is a good way to divide things up because it helps to give increasing clarity to your argument. So my first point is this: intellectual conversions from one belief system to another are convincing because something must have happened to change the person's beliefs. So you're thinking about here, like it's a classic case of St. Paul. He didn't believe Jesus was the Son of God or God on earth, and then he had the experience and then he believed that he was. Sundar Singh, he was a Sikh and he didn't believe in Christianity. In fact, he disbelieved it so much that he burnt the Bible page by page. He had the experience and then he believed in Christianity. Now, that's an intellectual conversion. They went from believing one thing to believing something else. Here we can use Anthony Fleur's arguments against him. Anthony Fleur said that religious experiences are not convincing because people tend to interpret people who are Christians tend to have Christian experiences. People who are Muslim have Muslim experiences, and so on and so on. So he says that's good evidence that people are interpreting the experience that they have in terms of the worldview they already have. Now, if that was true, then you'd expect St. Paul to have a Jewish religious experience that confirmed his view of Judaism, and Sundar Singh to have a Sikh religious experience which confirmed his view of Sikhism. So we can use Fleur's argument against himself here and say, well, in these situations, it seems that these people are having genuine religious experiences because it can't be that they're just interpreting their experience in line with the religious beliefs they already have. It must be that they're really having a Christian religious experience, and that's why they're converting to Christianity. It doesn't make sense why they changed their beliefs otherwise. Which is pretty strong, I think. However, this is what I would say. I like to think of it like this. If it was true that St. Paul had never heard of Christianity and Sundar Singh had never heard of Christianity, then their conversion experiences would be completely brilliant proof for the truth of Christianity, because how else could we explain them seeing Jesus and understanding that he was the Son of God if they'd never heard these ideas before? But actually, in most, and I would argue all cases, when someone has a conversion experience, they've already had some contact with the religion they convert to. And in fact, in St. Paul and Sundar Singh's case, they had quite an intense emotional relationship to that religion. So St. Paul, he hated Christianity, was willing to go as far as to approve of the death of people who were Christians. In Sundar Singh's case, he hated Christianity because of its place as the kind of religion of the colonialists in India. So they had this kind of very strong hatred towards the religion. So therefore, it kind of makes me think, well, yes, something must have happened. Maybe something happened for them to convert, but it gives the indication that this could have had some kind of psychological explanation. St. Paul, I always think about the key example. Perhaps something of some guilt played into his mind. Maybe that the psychologically the reason for his conversion was not because of God, but it could be argued it was to do with guilt from his past oppression of Christianity, making him have this experience which changed his views. After all, it's interesting that the experience began with Jesus saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" So there's a back and forth in terms of intellectual conversion. My second one will be moral conversion. Now, here I'm looking really at William James, because in William James's case, when he looks at experiences, and all the experiences that he's looking at are conversion experiences in the moral sense, because a person goes from having this sick soul, being disillusioned with life, to being full of joy and zest and a new selflessness and all this kind of thing. But William James's conversions were not intellectual conversions. Most of the people he interviewed were people who were Christians already in a nominal sense. They were kind of had some kind of lukewarm belief in Christianity. What the experience did is make them to be more committed to their religion and make them be more take more seriously, or put into practice more seriously, the moral teachings of the religion. Now, William James's argument of pragmatism is that the authenticity of religious experience is guaranteed by the fact that it makes this change in someone. And he talks about the changes: the greater patience, the decreased sense of selfishness, and the zest for life, joy about being moral, and so on. And the idea is, well, something must have happened to change these people. Something must have caused them to go from not being very moral to being extremely moral people. And that seems to be quite convincing. Why would they change unless something made them change? They had an experience. However, obviously, there's a debate about what it is that these experiences prove, because maybe James has proved that people who have these moral conversions are not lying about the experience, because it seems clear that there must have been something that made them change their life. However, the fact that they're not lying doesn't prove that the experience is from God. So James himself admits this. If you remember in the James lesson, James kind of admits that he cannot say definitively that these experiences come from God. All he says is that it's a reasonable hypothesis. And Bertrand Russell you could use, because he says, well, a fictional story can change your life. That doesn't make the story true. So James's pragmatism says something about conversion experiences, but it doesn't tell us that the conversion experiences really come from God. Okay, so then I would go on to, I've done two arguments in favour of conversion experiences, and then I've criticised them. Now I'm going to, the last one, Peril 3 or Peril 4, wants to be an argument against them, and then a response to the against them. So I've put here, well, the cause of the experiences is likely to be psychological. So we could talk about Freud, we could explain Freud's theory of hallucinatory psychosis, the Oedipus complex, and so on and so on. And then I would tie that together with Starbuck, because Starbuck seems to me to give a reason why conversion experiences are likely to happen at a particular point in someone's life, ages of 18 to 24. So those two together, you could argue that they provide a reason, an explanation why certain kinds of people are having these conversion experiences that has nothing to do with God. How do you respond to that? Well, Freud, it's easy to respond to because he doesn't give very much evidence. Lack of empirical evidence is a big problem with Freud, so you could say it's not backed up with evidence. Starbuck is a bit more interesting because he does back it up with evidence looking at different cases of people who've had these identity crises, but he doesn't really explain why some people. He says everybody aged 18-24 has this identity crisis and resolves it in some way. The question of why some people resolve their identity crisis in a religious way and others don't is not answered. So it's still something left unexplained there. But what I think is interesting about Freud and Starbuck about psychological is that it opens room to doubt. So if we were to say, well, okay, these experiences change people's lives, so they're probably not lying, that makes us think, well, maybe they really are experiences of God. And if we didn't have any other explanation, these experiences came from God, there's no other explanation, and then we'd have to accept them as evidence for God. As soon as we've got a different explanation, that is psychological explanation, even if we can't be sure that that psychological explanation is true, it opens room to doubt. It means that we all of a sudden can't be definite that the religious explanation is true because there's another option there. So that's how I would talk about that. Okay, the fourth one, which you could use, I would probably use a psychological one. Because of that, Starbuck has that something to say about something to say directly about conversion. But there is a direct link, well, quite an interesting link with this physiological one. So here the point would be that the cause of these conversion experiences is probably physiological. It's something to do with the temporal lobes of the brain. Physiological means to do with the physical body. Conversion experiences could be explained through temporal lobe epilepsy. And the link here is to St. Paul, because many people have argued that St. Paul's experience, he saw a bright light, he hears voices, sounds somewhat similar to experiences of people who have a fit who've got temporal lobe epilepsy. So maybe St. Paul was suffering from temporal lobe epilepsy, and that explains the condition. You could also tie in this with Persinger. Persinger says, Persinger tries to say that, well, all religious experiences, he thinks, are caused by stimulation of the temporal lobes of the brain, and his evidence suggests that a stimulation of the temporal lobe of the brain does cause some kind of religious experience. How do you respond? Well, it doesn't seem possible to me that all of those experiencing conversion had temporal lobe epilepsy. There's been many cases of people experiencing conversion. Can all of those be explained through temporal lobe epilepsy? Seems unlikely. If they're not, then can we really explain all of them through some kind of stimulation of the temporal lobe? Or where is that stimulation of the temporal lobe coming from if it's not epilepsy? In addition, Persinger's evidence itself has been questioned. The Swedish scientists who tried to recreate the study didn't find the same results as him, so there's a bit of doubt over those results anyway. So those are my 4 perils. I would do the first 2 and then one of the other 2 if I was doing an essay on conversion. Okay, let's do about corporate conversion experiences versus corporate experiences. So here's the question that's in your list of essays. Corporate experiences are better evidence for God's existence than conversion experiences. So basically saying, are the experiences like the Toronto blessing better evidence than experiences where people change their religion? So, it's Toronto blessing against Sundar Singh, so which is better evidence? Here's how I would go about tackling this essay. I think the things that's difficult about these essays, sometimes people just turn them into 2 mini essays, and I think that's absolutely fine. To do, so you do one kind of like a peril section, but it can be a bit longer than a normal peril on conversion, and one on corporate experiences. And it means, so then you reach your conclusion how valid are conversion experiences and how valid are corporate experiences, and then you say overall which is the better evidence. That's one way you could do it, and what I'm going to do here is a bit like that, but I've put a third peril in because I think that's one that you can link to both. So I'll begin by this. Let's begin by saying, well, okay, we're going to disagree and say conversion experiences are the strongest evidence. So we just want to here prove that conversion experiences are very strong evidence for the existence of God. So here I would combine my first two perils about convergent experiences before. So I would say the fact that these experiences cause a change in a person, either intellectually or morally, suggests that people are not lying. So we could say, well, let's go intellectually. St. Paul, he changed his beliefs from Jewish to Christian, so therefore it seems unlikely that he's making it up, because he wouldn't have made up something that went against his beliefs. William James's, that's the intellectual conversion. William James's subjects, the people he studies, they went from having this sick soul view of life to having this zest for life and being a morally better person. Seems that something must have happened to change it. My response would be, look, but this doesn't prove that these experiences are from God. What this seems to prove is that some kind of experience took place. It doesn't prove the experience came from God. Look at Bertrand Russell, look at William James and the things he said about his experience. So that'd be my convergent experience part of things. So we're kind of saying these are really strong evidence, but on the other hand, there's a bit of a problem with them. Then I might go here. This is kind of like a linking one because it brings in both. So I would say, okay, here's something to say none of them have any validity. All experiences are explained psychologically. We could talk about Freud, hallucinatory psychosis. We could go into the Oedipus complex and the need for a father figure that Freud thinks they have. You could link it to Starbuck. Now, your responses could be, this is where you have to be kind of clever about the way you link it to the different things. First of all, I do quite a small response thing where I just look at the problems with Freud and Starbuck, the lack of evidence of Freud and all that kind of stuff. In my evaluation, this is where I would kind of tie the two ends together, because I would say here that Freud and Starbuck make more sense when applied, even if they're not necessarily correct, even if there's problems with them, they offer more of a challenge to convergent experiences because there's a possibility that Freud and Starbuck could be correct, that there's a psychological explanation resulting in this hallucinatory psychosis for convergent experiences. However, Freud's ideas in particular don't work. Well, Starbuck's ideas aren't about corporate experience, they're about conversion, but Freud's ideas in particular don't work for corporate experiences because it's just too unlikely that all these people are having a hallucinatory psychosis at the same time. It would be like 1 billion to 1 chance that all these people are suffering from some kind of this hallucinatory psychosis all at the same time. So to me, that pushes the evidence in favour of corporate experiences because there's an explanation here of convergent experiences as not applied to corporate experiences. Then we go on to look at corporate experiences, and here I kind of reinforce the point that I've just made in the evaluation before. I'd say, well, let's look at corporate experiences in general. Things like the Toronto blessing can't be explained through hallucinatory psychosis, and they can't be explained through temporal lobe epilepsy either, because the idea that all these people in the Toronto blessing at the same time are experiencing some kind of stimulation of the temporal lobe is just highly unlikely. It's just a completely implausible explanation. So this suddenly puts, from this point of view, corporate experiences are now in the lead, right? Whereas, so we've got, if you think about the scope of the essay so far, we kind of were strong on convergent experiences. But then we said, yeah, it looks like convergent experiences, people aren't lying, but that doesn't mean that they really come from God. And then the psychological thing reinforced that and said, well, maybe these convergent experiences are caused by psychological causes. Then when we look at corporate experiences, we're like, well, definitely these can't be caused by the sort of psychological causes Freud is talking about, because this can't work like that. And also they can't be caused by temporal lobe epilepsy. So they suddenly seem to be in the lead. However, that's when we bring in the Ash experiment and say, maybe they can't be explained by Freud's theories, but they can be explained psychologically in a different way. And that is through group conformity, the idea of groupthink, and the Ash experiment. And the idea that either people are joining in with these corporate experiences because they feel pressure from the other people in the group, or they are so suggestible as people that the fact that other people around them seem to be experiencing the Holy Spirit convinces them that they really are experiencing the Holy Spirit. And this is often the easiest way with religious experiences, is just to, in the end, throw them all out. And so that, but when you do a conclusion, people often think, oh well, it's not going to be a good conclusion if I just say neither are very convincing. It's all about how much nuance you can add to that conclusion, though. If you can say, overall in this essay, I have shown that convergent experiences, it seems very unlikely that they're made up. There must be something happening in a convergent experiences. However, that doesn't mean they necessarily provide good evidence for belief in God, because that experience could come from somewhere else, from a psychological cause. Corporate experiences, on the other hand, at first glance seem to be more convincing, because the large number of people happening doing at the same time rules out certain explanations, temporal lobe epilepsy, hallucinatory psychosis. However, the Ash experiment, groupthink, still cause a problem, cause a big problem for believing in these experiences, and they suggest that there are other explanations for them too. Now, how you go with your conclusion in the end is up to you. You might want to say, there's still that hole in the theory, isn't there, with corporate experiences of how did the corporate experiences start in the first place? Groupthink only makes sense once a lot of people are involved in the experience. Then they can influence other people. How did the small group of people start having that experience in the first place? You could say that is a hole in the argument that makes corporate experiences more credible or likely. But it's up to you how you argue. Hope that helps. I'm just trying to kind of give you ideas to give structure to your essays, but also try and build that nuance into your argument.